Greetings, one and all, and welcome back to the 1904 Club, the Hull City podcast, of course, from the Hull Daily Mail. And we've almost all got synchronised backgrounds if you're watching on the YouTube. We've all got really boring white backgrounds. Anyway.
Excuse me, a picture of Dean Windass up there.
Yeah, somewhere in the distance, in Kathryn's lounge, is a picture of Dean Windass scoring the goal at Wembley. But generically, we've got white backgrounds. That is the dulcet tones of one Kathryn. How are you? How was Belgium? Your little trip over into Europe to watch England lose?
Yeah, I mean, England always lose in Belgium. It's just they lost 3-2 2 years ago. It just seems to be the ground where they don't seem to have much luck there, and it was compounded by getting the result through of the Hull City match as well. So it's a bad night all round. But Leuven itself, really nice place if you go and find yourself there for a couple of days. Although you can basically walk around it in about an hour. So nice place though.
Oh, lovely. Nigel Pearson's favourite horn. Fletch, from a very white background, how are you, darling?
I'm all right, thank you very much. I'm just quickly going through the comments, just getting them all ready. And KB, I'd just like to let you know that your dad is wondering if I was going to be on the podcast this week. So he's just checking in on me because he's such a nice man. So pass on my regards.
I was worried about where that was going when you said my dad had commented for a minute, but a nice comment. There you go.
Yeah. So, right, obviously City lost at Watford. It's now 3 days since that. We're going to try and be as optimistic about Hull City as we possibly can, given the fact they are only a couple of points above the drop zone and could be level on points with the team in the drop zone by the time they play on Monday night if results go against them. That would need Derby to win at Portsmouth, and it would need Cardiff to beat Stoke, and Stoke would drop into the bottom three and City would be out on goal difference, unless Cardiff, I think, would need to win 11-0 for City to drop into the drop zone on goal difference. So although that is unlikely, we still do need a snooker or two over the weekend just to make that Coventry game a little less edgy than it is going to be in any case. Right, we'll do this very quickly because I don't think we need to labour too much the point of what was another really poor performance from City at Vicarage Road. And for me, Fletch, that's three really poor performances since the international break. First half against Luton was palatable. They then concede that horror show goal at the start of the second half, and the rest of the game is a complete write-off. For 93 minutes at Hillsborough, the game was played like a flip-flop fest, as if there was nothing on the game. Neither team really could be bothered to win the game. And then they came alive, Lincoln's Cross, Charlie Hughes, that absolutely banging header to win the game at Hillsborough. You're then thinking, right, go on then, finally under Ruben, for the eighth time, I think, at the eighth opportunity, go and win a game after you've won a game, and they deliver a really tepid kind of game at Watford against a really average Watford side who had, didn't do a huge amount to win the game. So three really poor performances post-international break, a bit like we saw last season, a bit like we've seen earlier in this season. Fletch, your first thoughts before we come to you, Kathryn?
My first thoughts go back to when the full-time whistle went on the match against Watford. I was sitting in the BBC studio listening to Mike White and Peter Swan, and the same sort of thoughts were going through my mind of why on earth are we in this situation again? I messaged Mike on the night to say Hull City this season, they are consistent at being inconsistent, and we've used that, I think, a few times so far this season. The £1 million question is why? And sadly, if we knew the answer to it, I don't think Hull City would be in the situation that they're in. And the goal against Watford, we were talking about it before we started recording this podcast. I think it really hits home with some of the players that we know and love, at how much they've changed under all the different managers that have come in. And the person I'm talking about specifically to start with is Regan Slater, because I think an old Regan Slater, in that situation where the Watford man is trying to cross the ball in for Sissoko to put it in the back of the net, an old Regan Slater for me would, at least in the worst case scenario, give away a penalty and would actually endeavour to try and either slide in and try and block the ball out for a corner kick or at least try and close the man down. He's 3 or 4 yards away from the man. And that's the really disappointing thing at some of the goals that City are conceding at the minute. They look too easy to concede and they look too easy to play through at times in certain areas. It feels a bit lethargic. It feels like not caring is far too strong, because I know full well that they will be caring. But it feels on the outside looking in like almost the same motions almost of 2019, 2020, where I just want to see some of the players digging each other out on the pitch now. I want to see the manager, to some degree, breaking cover and saying, so-and-so needs to do better, so-and-so needs to do this, because some players will react positively to that. Like in my work environment, I'm quite happy to take a brutal battering verbally if I've done something wrong, because I know it'll make me better. And I get that all players will learn in different ways, but it feels like everyone's being treated in the same manner, and not everyone can learn or improve or adapt in the same way. And it just feels like at the moment, the phrase I use is very robotic from the touchline in what's being said, and when it's being transferred onto the pitch, it doesn't feel like there's too much improvement. It feels like we had a sort of honeymoon period, especially away from home, most weeks. But now we seem to be just going through the motions again. A few Sabres, 3 games in a row where they look limited.
Kathryn, before just on that, on Fletch's point about the players digging each other out and the manager, is that something that, yeah, look, it can be great for us in the media to talk about. It generates great talking points, great stories, that sort of thing. But is it helpful, particularly at this stage of the season, if after the game, when I spoke to Ruben after the game and I asked him about the goal, and he comes out and goes, well, actually, he was rubbish. That was shocking. He's got to do better. If they have those conversations behind closed doors in the dressing room, where I'm sure players, the likes of Louis Coyle, Regan, Sean McLaughlin, Alfie, John Egan, insert name of player, will have been pointing fingers. Is that stuff better done behind closed doors rather than the glare of supporters, other teams, and also the media?
Yeah, a little bit. I think I kind of see what James is saying though, because you go back to what I would call the glory days when we had Ian Ashby, and he was just an enforcer. If someone hadn't done their job properly, he would turn around and tell them. And I appreciate that, like, yeah, maybe they're doing that in the dressing room, but I think for the supporters watching, you want to see that fight, and it just looked, the goal was so bad, the way that Sissoko was just able to drift, and nobody really seemed to sort of pick him up or notice him. No one really communicated amongst the back four of, oh, by the way, he's going over there. He was just allowed to wander into the box. The cross came in far too easily again, and at that point, you almost want to see, as a fan, one of the captain or whoever it is turn around to someone and say, like, come on, this needs to be better. It doesn't mean that you don't want to see players arguing on the pitch. I think that's when I always get the fear, when 2 players start arguing with each other over a goal. I never think that looks good. But you want almost your captain to kind of collectively, without picking a single player out, just collectively kind of saying to the team, come on, because it sort of didn't look like they appreciate that they're really in a relegation fight here. Because if we do. We really appreciate that we're in the thick of it. And I'm, verge between thinking, oh, we're going to be all right, and then thinking, I'm a bit concerned again. And on Tuesday, just because of the fact they'd won the last game, as you said, Baz, you're expecting them to really kind of show some, show some kind of passion and, right, we're going to take that win and we're going to go and get another. And then to just kind of slump in the sort of the manner that they did was just really disappointing. What was also disappointing was the fact that Musa Sissoko scored the goal, and about 3 weeks ago he added me on LinkedIn. I don't know why. When it comes through and it was sort of like, I'm sure he's still playing, and I had to look up who he was playing for, and he was like, oh, he's at Watford, and he's like, we play them in a few weeks. It was so random. Like, I thought, I don't know why it happened, but I think somehow he did it deliberately just so he could score against us, and then I'd have to look at him on LinkedIn. Very weird. I might unconnect from him now.
That's bizarre. Yeah, I think my frustration comes from, look, we all want to see the team do well, and you always, I generally always tend to be glass half full as opposed to half empty. And I really, me and Burnsy always have a conversation before the game. Like, the general, what do you think today? You talk about the team. You always have those conversations. And he said to me, what do you think? And I think part of me thinks, Burnsy, that they'll go and win today. But my underlying kind of nagging doubt about this team is they're really flaky. You would never, ever, ever in a million years put any money on them to get a result because they're so flaky. And I wanted them. I just felt, as poor as they were in that second half against Luton, dreadful. As pretty poor as they were at Hillsborough, I've got to be fair to both teams. Wednesday created a lot more, but City, both teams, neither were great. But then they've won the game, and kind of the manner of that goal, the scenes, the incredible scenes we saw at the end with the players celebrating with the supporters. You kind of felt I wanted them to come out against the Watford team that had just lost at Bristol City, that haven't won within 6 before Tuesday, hadn't been in great form. I wanted them to, from the kickoff, to grab the game by the scruff of the neck and go, right, okay, we're here. We're now going to grasp this opportunity to get to play on the front foot. And instead, the game kicks off, and within 30 seconds, Watford have hit the other side of the crossbar. I don't care, that can happen because Kayembe's had a great effort. He's bought a ticket and he's had a shot, something that City don't really do, or haven't done enough. And then it kind of set the tone for the game, really, where Watford didn't offer a huge amount after that. City had a couple of half glimmers of positivity, but it was just another nothing performance where, and I know, look, there's a reason they are third or fourth bottom, and they've spent most of the season in the bottom 3 or very close to it. They're not good enough to go and win 4, 5, 6 games on the spin. That much is obvious because of where they are. But winning 2 games at this level is not. It's not easy, but it's not that difficult. Other teams have managed it throughout the season. For crying out loud, Derby, who had picked up 2 points in 3 months, won 3 in a row. Yes, they lost at Swansea, and then have drawn with Burnley. But if Derby can go and win 3 games on the spin, surely my theory was surely what they would have got from winning at Hillsborough would have given them the kick up the backside. I just think complacency is a thing. I think after the Plymouth game and after the Oxford game, they thought it was almost like feet up, we're safe now, lads. Then they have the setback against Luton, like, okay, we might need to do something. They go and beat Sheffield Wednesday. Let's be fair, by one moment. They didn't play well. They didn't carve out. You can't say it was a performance where they carved out a plethora of chances and they deserved to win. They didn't deserve to win the game, but they created a magic. Well, Lincoln's free kick and Charlie created that moment. He made something happen. For in the Luton game and the Watford game, they were waiting for something to happen. It was almost like they were expecting one moment of brilliance to get them out of the pot again. And I think I just want to see more. I'm not being negative. I'm realistic, and I was saying from back in early weeks of the season that I felt the whole club, top to bottom, was sleepwalking into a relegation battle, and the word I used yesterday was comatose. I just felt they're in a state of coma at times where they don't realise that actually, hang on a minute, this is pretty serious. And I know there's an element of fear. No doubt there's an element of fear in their performances, but you've got to see a bit more from them away at Watford, who aren't, with respect, this isn't a Leeds United, a Sheffield United or a Burnley you're playing, even a Sunderland. You're playing a Watford team that had won 1 in 6, had just lost at Bristol City and were effectively out of the playoff race. I got 3 or 4 big injuries, and they just didn't turn up. I just want to see more. We keep talking about they've got quality in the players and the manager. Everybody's saying, well, we're in a false position after 41 games. But I just want to see a bit more. I don't know if that's me, if I'm being negative, fine. But I was really, really disappointed with the whole effort on Tuesday night. The team selection kind of baffled me a bit, I'm not going to lie. But there we are, Kathryn. There we are.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. That's it, isn't it? You just want them to realise that the kind of situation, because it does kind of feel like it's almost like they think they're just, they're going to be fine and kind of scrape over the line. But teams, below us, look at Luton. Luton is still in the bottom 3, but I think they're unbeaten in, is it 5 games or something like that? It might not be quite as many as that, but it's they're unbeaten in a while. Beat us, they got a draw against Leeds, get a last minute equaliser at Stoke. I did think they probably needed to win that game, but to get a last minute equaliser, it just shows that they're showing a bit more fight than we are. That's what it feels like anyway. I think the only kind of thing that's keeping me kind of positive is just the amount of teams that are still in it. I think Plymouth have gone now, kind of losing the other night. I think we can finally sort of wave them goodbye potentially.
Yeah.
And it's now a case of 2 places left. And I thought if Luton had lost at Stoke that they would have been gone as well, but they're now sort of still in it. Obviously, if some of the teams have got to play each other around there, you mentioned Derby playing Portsmouth. Portsmouth are only a point ahead of us, so I kept thinking Portsmouth are out of it, but they're actually not. Oxford are still in it, although they play Sheffield Wednesday away on the weekend, which looks like a potentially favourable fixture for them. And Cardiff and Stoke play each other, so one of them's got to drop points. And then I think over the next few weeks, Derby play Luton and things like that, and Stoke have got to play Luton. So they're actually, like, I think it's almost good now that we're not playing anyone around us until we play Derby, because it gives us a little bit of, like, teams around us are going to, at least some of them are going to have to drop points. And if we can just pick up the odd point here and there, that might just get us over the line. But I'm expecting them on Monday, regardless of what the other results are. I'm expecting them at least to come out and show something. And if they get beat by Coventry, I think we say, you know, okay, fair enough. Coventry are going for the playoffs. They're a better side than we are. But I just want to show. I want to see them, like, properly be in the game, show something. And if they lose, they you know, at least they've kind of given it a go, because I feel like in the games that they've lost, you know, the last couple of games they've lost, it just didn't really feel like they'd given it a proper go.
Yeah, Fletch. In the last three performances, there's been a real. I mean, they weren't great at West Brom. Let's be fair. So, but they got a very good point. It was the way they fought back to get that point. I think was really encouraging. But they were, we shouldn't hide away from the fact in that first half, West Brom carved them open 2 or 3 times and were poor in front of goal. So, it's just the lack of intensity, that lack of, look, people know I was historically a big fan of Ruben, and I like him. And you look at the stats since he's been in the job. I think they're 11th in the table in the 22 games or whatever it is. So he has turned around the sinking ship really well. But there have been some really poor performances, and it's all right. And he'll say to me when I speak to him this afternoon that we're competitive. He said to me after the game, we're competitive in every game. Yeah, but so is every other team in the league. Competitive isn't just enough to get you 3 points. I would expect any team at this level with players paid an awful lot of money to be competitive is the bare minimum. Now I want my team to be competitive, but I want them to be just play with a bit more intensity, a bit more tempo. And yeah, I understand that they have been defensively, they've been relatively solid. And when you look at goals conceded, they're kind of like middle of the table. It's at the other. It's goals for 40-41 is only Luton have scored less. It's. I think if you're in, I don't care for XG. I think it's a pointless waste of time. But for those people that do care for it, I think their XG is 45, so they're 5 goals behind where they should be for the chances they create. They're middle of the road for chances created in terms of the table. But I want my team to be more than competitive, and I know they're in a relegation battle and they've got to be tight, and they are tight. But there needs to be a bit more intensity that they play with, rather than the slow. And we accuse Liam's team last season of being a bit slow and ponderous, and in fairness, he had better players. But it seems to be a recurring theme that everything is in front of them. You're playing João Pedro and Matt Crooks. They're never going to break the lines. They're never going to get in behind and beat defences for pace. They're so easy to defend against.
Well, let's have a look at what some of the fans have put, because we've got loads of comments. Matt Bonewell says, we lack any form of identity on the pitch. We're not hard to beat. We're not clinical. We're not good at pressing. We're not good at counter-attacking. We're not good at possession football. We're slow. We're not good at set pieces or being physical. Ending the point, what are we, with a question mark. Jamie T just says, meh, at the other end of the spectrum. Scott Peck says, we're rubbish in the final third. We need a clear out. Can't see us staying up. And if we go down, we won't see the 3 players with ACLs in a City shirt again. Robin says it feels a lot like 2020 when key players stop performing. Some of them are protecting themselves, ready for summer moves. I'm not sure that's necessarily the case, even though we might come on to what Gustavo Puerta said in an interview a little later on. Harvey says slow, no urgency, not willing to take risks or win games. Get the sense these players think they're too good to go down. Inconsistent from Bailey, inconsistent from Ashley. Adam Brooks says no identity when we're passing forward. Where is the high intense pressing that he told us we would play? What is the actual system? And loads coming through. And the other one I'll add is Sunglasses Ron, not the one from Only Fools and Horses. Players seem to think from Regan's interview that they've got all the time in the world to turn this around, yet there's no evidence to suggest it will happen. Why hasn't it happened before now? We've been in this situation for long enough. And one thing that I'll throw in regarding the goals that you've just touched upon, Baz, would anyone like to have a go at when Hull City scored 40 goals last season? Because that's how many they're on in the league. How long do you think it took them to get to 40 goals last year?
Middle of February.
New Year's Day.
I was going to say January, yeah.
So we've gone nearly another 3.5, 4 months, and we've only just reached that point of where they were before, which I think really highlights, just in terms of maybe quality and tactical thinking, how far they've fallen in the space of 12 months.
I would look on some good points there as well. So, and thanks everybody for getting in touch as always. We appreciate you. I would disagree on the first point that they're not hard to beat. I think they are hard to beat. I think the results since Ruben has come in proves they are hard to beat. You know, they've taken a point off Leeds. They've beaten Sheffield United. They've beaten Sunderland. You know, they were. There have been moments in games. You know, the first 20 minutes at Burnley, they were torn to pieces. But what I would counter that by saying is Burnley have got a better squad. You know, Jadon Anthony is, with respect to Sean McLaughlin, who, funny enough, had 2 great chances at Watford, is a centre half playing at left back, and that still blows. Look, off at a tangent slightly, admittedly, that it blows my mind that City have paid £4 million on an attacking left back, and he's currently on the bench at Middlesbrough. You know, so you're having to play a left-footed central defender at left back, and it's obviously not working. You know, Maka does a great job. He's a great lad. He gives his absolutely everything for the football club every time he pulls the shirt on, but he's not an attacking left wing back. So and Louis Coyle's having a really poor season by his standards. It happens, but they're so easy to play against, and there's almost no threat coming from the flanks because you've got a left-footed centre half playing at left back. So whenever Maka gets to the halfway line, his natural instinct when he's faced with a defender is to turn back inside and go back instead of trying to play a 1-2 and go bursting down the left, which is what Ryan Giles was signed for, and we paid £4 million in the summer. And realistically, he's out at Middlesbrough, not playing, apart from a few minutes here and there. We're paying a chunk of his salary. He's going to come back in the summer along with Malem, Rachopi, blah, blah. And they're going to have a decision. That's another. I know I'm flying off, and that's another. It's a conversation for another day. But the point I'm making is that they're not as good as teams like Burnley. They haven't got that quality of player. So there are going to be games where they look poor, but I don't agree that they're easy to beat. To beat. They're not. You know, the results show that. Tom Cleverley the other night said how difficult City are to play against. How really difficult Ruben has made them to break down. And they're not. If they were conceding 3s and 4s, if they were awful, complete shambles at the back like Plymouth are, I'd go, yeah, they're easy to beat. I don't think they are, personally. I agree with a lot of the other sentiments. I do think they've got an identity. Whether you like it or you don't, their identity is there under Ruben. It has deviated at times, but they are in a relegation battle and they are scrapping for points. And ultimately, things are going to go awry at times in a game at this stage of the season. But I do, Kathryn, what do you think? Because I think they are hard to beat.
Yeah, I'm sorry. When you sort of listed all those players that are going to come back, and I just sort of thought I'd forgotten Ryan Giles was ever going to come back. I thought forgot that he's coming back at some point. If the end of season inquest ever happen, if the worst happens, I think we go back to whoever did that transfer deal, and that's possibly the point where things started to go wrong. But yeah, I think they're well organised. I think they're better. They're harder to beat when they're playing the better teams, if that makes sense, because they're just sort of, they will sit in and maybe try and soak up that pressure. I think when they struggle is when they're trying to take the game to teams, and then sometimes they can maybe lose possession and get kind of done on the break, and that was kind of a problem under Tim Volter as well, getting done on the break quite a lot. I just think they let themselves down in moments, so generally throughout a game they can be hard to beat, and then they'll just concede a soft goal like they did against Watford. Just that kind of moment of switching off. It quite often comes in the second half, like whether it's straight after half time or sort of 10 minutes, 15 minutes after half time. That always seems to be the period where we maybe concede a goal in the second half. I think it's happened quite a few times.
9 times, I think, in the first 10 minutes of the second half.
Started second half games too, and that's been under both managers. I don't know why that is, why they can't seem to fix that. And a lot of the goals they concede are very similar. like the cross coming in, player unmarked, free run, and it's just sort of it's the basic ones that they struggle with. That's I think what annoys me a little bit. That it's kind of been a recurring problem throughout the season that they've just not fixed. But when they went to Bristol City, played with 10 players and they only conceded a penalty. Yes, Bristol City had a lot of possession and, probably should have scored more goals. But to be fair to them, they sat in with 10 players for a long time and made it really difficult. And that's what they can do when they're at their best defensively. But as you mentioned, I still think there's weaknesses there. I thought when I watched the goal that Louis Coyle looked like a player that was tired. He's had times where maybe he's been in and out the team or he's picked up injuries, over the last couple of years, and it almost looked like he needed a rest. But that's obviously not no one else really to go and come in for him at this point. McLaughlin, again, I think he's done really well in a position that isn't his, but again, as you mentioned, he's got his limitations in that position. And Matty Jacobs, much as I like him, he's just not quite ready, and I don't think you can kind of throw him in at this point of the season. And equally, I don't know how much more he would offer going forward. I actually think McLaughlin probably a bit more assured defensively. But yeah, I also think the defence, to be fair, I don't think they're helped out by the midfield at times. I think it's not just the back four that can be sloppy and kind of let crosses come in. As James was talking about, Slater earlier on, not kind of tracking the players. I think sometimes Alzate, as much as I like him as a player, can be guilty of switching off defensively and not always kind of tracking runners and putting tackles in. And that's a bit of a problem as well. It feels like we've not really got a midfield enforcer, somebody to break up the play. But I think that's been a problem I think we've been missing that for years, if I'm being honest.
I think what I would say is, Fletch, is and to Kathryn as well, I think defensively they get exposed a lot. You're absolutely right about the midfield, completely right. But the goals conceded is accentuated because they just don't score any goals. If they were winning games 2-1 or 3-1, the goals against would be less of a concern. But they just don't score any goals. As at 41 games is pitiful, and they're not creating. It was one of them where you come away from the Watford game and you look at this. I looked at the stats straight after the game, and I think they 15. I think it was 16 attempts on goal, 5 on target. And I remember speaking. I put this to Ruben after the game, and I said, when you look at the stats, you think, as an away team, that's quite good. You've come away from home, you've had 15 attempts at goal, you've hit the target with 5 of them. That's not terrible. But then I'm thinking back, but I can't really remember if I'm the Watford goalkeeper. I don't think I've made a save that is really difficult. Having a powder puff effort from 5 yards and it just trickles and the goalkeeper picks it up, counts as a shot on target. I don't really think they tested the goalkeeper, and it's obviously been an issue all season. They didn't sign a striker in the summer. They didn't sign a good striker in the summer. With respect to João Pedro, and I think he's done okay. He's now 33. He scored 6 goals. Kamara has scored 4. You then into, as we said, I've got Chris Beddier 3. Joe Gowhart 3, and he's been in since January. It's just not good enough, and they just don't score goals. And I think the problem is because they don't score any goals. Any team in the Championship, even if we see it in the Premier League, teams are going to create against you. No one's good enough to not have any chances created. And at some point, you're going to concede, whether it's an absolute belter of a strike, a mistake, a bit of a fluke, whatever. Somebody's going to score a goal. And the trouble is, because City aren't scoring anything, you're then losing loads of games. They pretty much lose. When they lose, they lose 1-0 because they can't score at one end, and then they switch off, or there's an error, or you get a free goal like the Luton game, switch off as badly as they did at Watford, and suddenly you lose the game 1-0 that they should never have. You didn't deserve to lose the game at Watford, really. Certainly didn't deserve to win it. But it comes, for me, everything comes down to the lack of kind of presence, the lack of creativity, and that ruthless edge in the top third of the pitch. And that is ultimately, if they get relegated, which God forbid they don't, but with 5 games to go, and there's a good chance they will. That is where, when we look back, when we do the post-mortem, and God, that's going to take some time. Whatever happens, actually, it will be the lack of goals. They just haven't created enough chances, and they certainly haven't. They don't look a threat. if I was an away team or an opposition team against Hull City, I would relish defending against them because I know the wingers aren't going to go past me. There's no wingers that are going to get the ball and run at me like we saw Gassama at Hillsborough a couple of times in the first half. Took on McLaughlin, burst past him and put crosses in. There's nobody in the City team that can do that. They're not going to play through you really because you've got Pedro rarely goes in behind. Great goal at Bristol City, but that's a one-off. Crooks rarely he's not going to burst past you. So if you defend relatively deep and sit in, they can't, like Luton did, they can't break you down. Then you're relying on a Charlie Hughes moment, aren't you? So that for me is the fundamental problem. Defensively, yes, they've conceded some absolute horror shows, and you can't deny that. But defensively, in the last since the new managers come in, they've not been too bad. They've been on par with a lot of better teams in the league defensively. But it's basically for me. It's the front third of the pitch, defending from the top, back down through the team, and then obviously they're not scoring enough. So anyway, let's park Watford because it was.
I was going to get a question off all that, as I'm not going to lie. I was sat here on tenterhooks, stood here on tenterhooks waiting for a question.
Okay. Well, how do they get more goals in the team then? Now, both of you go on that before we move on to Coventry because we're running out of time.
Well, keep it really simple. Take the shackles off and just let them shoot. Don't over egg it. Don't play tippy tappy 3-4 passes into the penalty area, trying to perfect the environment. Just have a go. And see if it comes off, it comes off, and if it doesn't, it doesn't. But at least you've shown the endeavour to actually have a crack at goal.
As Burnsy said last year, have a go at the coconut. Kathryn?
I think they've got to move Gelhardt back into the middle. I think they've looked a lot better going forward when he's been more central, and I think when he goes out wide, it's just not as effective. And whether that means dropping a midfielder or dropping whoever it is, I just think you've got to play Gelhardt in the middle.
Yeah.
Louis Barry's not anywhere near being back, is he?
Well, we'll hopefully get another update on that today, but I don't think he's too far away from what I'm gathering. He won't be back for the Coventry game on Monday night, but there's a small chance that he could feature over Easter. So let's wait and see. We're recording this on Friday, late Friday morning. We're with Ruben on Friday afternoon and Lincoln as well, actually. First chance we've had to speak to him since he moved in January. So, yeah, we'll get an update on Louis Barry. But obviously, that would be I know we've not seen a huge amount from him in the couple of games or 4 games, 3.5 games, 3 and a bit games that we had of him. So, yeah, but hopefully he's not too far away. And he's something different, isn't he? He's another option.
Yeah, absolutely. Just somebody else to put on. I feel like he's the type of player that we're talking about. Take the shackles off. Like I think he could kind of come on and just kind of go for it. And I appreciate he's not played for a while and might not be fit, but it's just another option to have
for the final 20 minutes. Right, let's look ahead to the game against Coventry on Monday night. Obviously, given it's Monday, it's on the telly. I think it's an 8:00 kickoff after everybody else has played, so we'll know how the picture looks. Coventry hadn't been in great form, but did get I love Jamie Patterson. Brilliant volley to win the game against Portsmouth, doing City a bit of a favour on Wednesday night. I think it was the 94th minute. Frank Lampard was sent off against Burnley, but because the FA hadn't processed it, he was on the touchline against Portsmouth, but he was charged, I think, on Thursday. And has until Monday to respond to that charge. He's not going to appeal it. So he expects that he will be banned from the touchline at the MKM Stadium. Kathryn, Coventry, again, a game that, when we looked at the final 10, on paper you probably said Bristol City and Coventry on paper were the two most difficult in terms of positions. Coventry back in the playoffs, how do you see it?
I mean, it might depend as well, kind of what the results are like at the other end of the table and what position they're in come Monday, whether they're still in the playoffs or whether they're, they've dropped out, if people have gone above them, or kind of what their situation is might contribute to how they play as well. I think it's going to be a really difficult game. The only thing giving me a slight bit of hope is that City do tend to play better against the teams higher up the table. Obviously, Watford an exception to that. But so, if it's not on, the onus isn't on City to take the game to the opposition, which it quite often is at home, and I think that's why they struggle so much. It might actually suit them a little bit better if Coventry come at them and are a bit more open, and then if City can maybe try and kind of exploit gaps on the break. Frank Lampard's got a great record coming to our stadium as a manager and a player. I think as a manager, I have to check it, but I'm pretty sure he's not lost. Potentially as both. I remember when he was Derby manager, I think he beat us. I think he was Chelsea manager when we played them in the FA Cup and they beat us. And there might have been another occasion where he's come as a manager and won as well. And then as a player, he quite often scored when he was playing for Chelsea against us. So maybe it's quite good that he'll be in the stand and out of the way. But yeah, I think it's going to be a really, really difficult one. But the only kind of hope is that maybe they surprise us, because that's what they usually do.
Yeah, and look, Fletch, Coventry had been in unbelievable form. I think they'd won five in a row, but then they went to Derby, where from what I gather, they've not got a great record. They lost away at Derby, then beat Sunderland, lost to Sheffield United and Burnley, and then obviously returned by beating Portsmouth. But you watched that game, didn't you? They weren't great, Cov, were they?
I think what they had, though, which could be a problem for City on Monday night, is they had drive, and they had the opportunity to actually continue to try and carve out opportunities. And the player who hit the post, and I think it was Kitchen, hit the post from a set piece, which should have gone in, really, from where he was stood. And Portsmouth were quite happy to bank in and sit in and try and absorb the pressure, and credit to them, they nearly did. They nearly won the game, because Cohen Bramall nearly went up the other end in stoppage time, and then he fluffed his lines. So the thing that City are going to have to be aware of is that this Coventry team does have that ability not to be continuous in their attacking play, and be able to continue with tempo, and be able to continue to put pressure on a defensive line, which is probably why they've been so successful under Frank Lampard, winning 7 of 10. Kathryn, you were spot on, by the way, played 5-1-5 as a manager against Hull City. So, that bodes well, doesn't it? It's the only club with a 100% record against at this moment in time. So it's going to be difficult. It's going to be difficult. I think the fans are really going to have to get behind them. I think, but the problem is, I think the way things are going at the moment, fans are just fed up at the moment, aren't they? Fans are anxious, and this is going to be probably a tipping point, I think, because if they find themselves in the bottom 3, even though numerically they're still perfectly capable of getting out of it, the task is going to be a lot harder than it perceives on a league table.
Coventry away from home, very similar record away to City, actually. They've played a game less. Coventry have played 20, they've won 6, drawn 5, lost 9, scored 22, conceded 29, and 23 of their points have come away. Whereas City they're 9th in the away table. Hull City are 8th, having played a game more and won a game more, and claimed 2 points more away from home. So look, obviously it's going to be difficult, but both teams have got jeopardy. Both teams need something from the game. Even if all the results go City's way, and I guess in essence you'd want Portsmouth to beat Derby possibly, because if Derby get a point, that's a point closer. But equally, if Portsmouth win, I kind of think you want Portsmouth out and away and done and safe before that final game, and you want Derby staying in it. You want Stoke probably to beat Cardiff. It keeps them in it. Luton let's have a look at Luton. Where are Luton?
40, 23rd.
Yeah. They are, well, they've got Blackburn, so that's a given given the way Blackburn are going. That's 3 points for Luton anyway. But look, City have just got to take care of themselves, and that's always been the case. It's not changed. It's the same now. They've just got to go out and if they can beat Coventry, which, let's be honest, I know it's at home, so there's that caveat to it, but they've shown away from home against the better teams that they can be a threat, that they can get results. They've now got to transfer that to doing that at home, because, let's be fair, they've won 4 games this season at home. Cardiff, Swansea, Plymouth, Oxford. They've not beaten a decent team. They got a point against Leeds. Yeah, okay. So they've got to do something they've not done all season. That's beat a team that's half decent at home. So right, that's that game done. Let's just quickly touch on Gustavo Puerta, because he's obviously done an interview in South America, and it was his words were reflected that he's come to England. He wants to move to a bigger club in the summer. As it stands, he's still on loan from Leverkusen now. He's very, very close to having that clause activated, which would see him become a permanent Hull City player for about £3 million. Whether or not he plays at the weekend on Mondays is debatable because and this is genuine. I've got to be honest. When I was first told he was missing the Watford game ill, my first thought was, how convenient, given the fact that there's this clause hanging over him. But I've been reliably informed from people that wouldn't lie that it's genuine, that he's got a stomach complaint, and he did visit a medical facility and get it checked out, and he's on antibiotics. So that is a genuine story. That's not anybody. And all the conspiracy theorists that were out there that suggested that the story that went up on the Hull Daily Mail website on Thursday was orchestrated by the club, nothing to do with it. It was just, it had been written for a few days. It was decided that in between games, there was no ulterior motive, basically. It was just, that was a gap in the schedule to put a story up. And given the fact he didn't play, there was no conspiracy there. It was just a genuine, he's done this interview, fine. Kathryn, what were your thoughts on what he's had to say?
Ill-advised, I would say. Just not. I think you have to give a bit of leeway because of the language barrier. English isn't his first language. He's done it in, I assume, his native language, and the translation and everything. I think you give a little bit of leeway. He's still a young player. He looks a little bit older, but he's still a young player, and he's sometimes are going to make errors of judgment and come out and say different things. I don't actually mind him saying something like, I want at some point I want to go to a big club. That's fine, as long as he's given 100% now. You can't say something like that and then put in a subpar performance, on the match day. So it's never a good idea to say you want to go to a bigger club while you're in a relegation battle with the club that you're currently with. Albeit he's on loan and he's not a permanent player, but at some point it looks like he is going to be a permanent player. It's just something that he didn't need to do, and it's just unnecessarily gets people annoyed, and gets if he's back for Monday and he plays and he doesn't play well, it's become such an easy target then for the fans to jump on and say, well, he doesn't want to be here. Whereas actually, I think, albeit he's maybe not been as good since he had the red card, which was a ridiculous decision, he has actually shown, recently in the last couple of months that he's actually can be an important player. I think he has put in some good performances. He's been inconsistent like everybody else has, but I don't think there's not really been many occasions where I've kind of gone, oh, he doesn't really look bothered. I think he's always tried pretty hard. But it was just an unnecessary thing to say. I don't know if it was his idea to do the interview, whether his agent was involved or not. I don't know. But it's just, I would just say it was ill-advised. But if he comes back into the team and plays well, I don't mind it. But you say something like that, you've got to back it up.
Fletch?
I think just to tackle, and I think I'm glad that you mentioned the idea of it being an agent, Kathryn, because that was, when I read this, and I'll give you a quote from the article, he translated, "I've already completed years in Europe. The adaptation has been progressively better. I can now say I'm adapting to the food, the people, European culture. That's the hardest part, feeling better on the pitch. I'll keep working and hope to move to a bigger club next season to continue demonstrating my quality." I think, personally, without, I don't have the full proof of it, I think, to be brutally honest, with the way that agents work, I wouldn't be at all surprised if someone within his circle has put him up to it, to be brutally honest. Because I think, I've got to be honest, I remember there was an interview that I think Cyrus Christie did an interview once with the BBC, and it felt very random at the time. And I don't think you'd ever expect interviews of this nature to suddenly come out from someone who's in a relegation dogfight. And personally, to me, I think this is a way of putting himself in the shop window for the worst case scenario, and that is if Hull City go down. Because let's be honest, Gustavo Puerta is knocking on the door of playing for his native Colombia in the future. He's been in the under-21 setup. He's not going to get seen if he's playing third tier football in England, let's be honest, he will want to move elsewhere. And that's, I think, all this is really. I think it's a preparation for the eventuality of if Hull City were to go down, then Puerta would be out the door. Got to be honest, I think he might be out of the door anyway. To be honest, I think this still there's a whiff of the Ryan Giles situation about it with this obligation, which Baz, I'm sure you'll be able to fill us in maybe on the nuts and bolts of the deal. But he's been in and out of the side in a similar way when Keane Lewis-Potter in lockdown was in and out of the team, had to be benched while they were discussing a contract, that kind of stuff. It just feels like people around him are making calls for him, either to drop him, to play him, or, okay, this one was perfectly plausible, the illness, etc. But I just feel like there's probably a lot of people around him at the moment that are trying to make decisions for him when really, in this case scenario, should be just concentrating on playing his football.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I like him as a lad. I think he's only 21. He's got potential. You think of I think it was the goal against Plymouth, where beautiful drop of the shoulder, spin turn, played the ball through for João Pedro, who then crossed brilliantly for Kamara to score at the back post. That for me showed Gustavo Puerta is that ability, that vision to drive City forward, and we don't see enough of it from the team really to drive through midfield and try and play through the lines. Look, there's an element of it could have been lost in translation. I think the wider problem for me, above what he said, and look, there'll be a lot of players angling for different things at this stage of the season because they don't know what the future holds. There'll be players that want to stay, irrespective of what league they're in. There'll be players that are thinking, hang on, if this goes bent, I want to get out, and they'll be tapping their agent up for bits and pieces. So look, the wider concern for me is Hull City have agreed a deal on a certain amount of performances. Are going to have to pay it realistically, and I genuinely believe this. I don't think I'm being naive here. That the manager is trying to keep the team in the division, and if he thinks that Puerta can make that difference in helping him win football matches, he'll play him, even if it means that he's got to pay. The club have got to fine £3 million. It's not up front, of course it's not, because it's a transfer fee and they're staggered over a period over the duration of the contract. So it's not like they've got to fine £3 million by Friday afternoon. So I don't think that I genuinely, from speaking to Ruben on record and off record, away from cameras and things, I don't believe that Ruben's thinking, well, there's a clause. I genuinely believe with Ruben, he will pick him if he thinks he can score goals or make a difference.
Maybe he'll be doing a press conference Baz later, maybe like rerun of the Kamara situation. Maybe he'll be sat next to Ruben.
Maybe Amrabat might be after posting an Instagram picture of his thanking everybody at Watford and not thanking the 800 supporters that had trekked down there to watch him lose. But anyway, I digress. Just to labour the point, the wider concern I've got is about City's transfer dealings and how he's going to be another player that they're like Giles. They agreed. I think we'd all agreed last January. Great signing at the time. Thought brilliant. Then they commit to paying £4 million in the summer. Have to pay it, but don't really want to. Hence, while they tried to get him to go to Middlesbrough in the summer. Then obviously he goes. Whatever happens to Ryan Giles, there's no way on this earth they're going to get £4 million back for him. Probably the scenario is that he comes back in the summer and he goes out on loan again, or they sell him for a couple of £1 million. They're not going to be getting anywhere near £4 million. Assuming they will sign Puerta, and then they look to try and move him on in the summer, are they going to get £3 million again? I'd really doubt that, given the fact that when you look, yes, he's a player of potential. He's young. I get all that, but when you look at his underlying numbers and his stats in the Championship, is he a £3 million player right now? Is another club from anywhere in the world going to come in and buy Puerta for £3 million? So at least City don't lose money. I might be wrong, but my gut feeling is no. So again, a bit like Giles, they're going to lose money on him. A bit like Abdouche, they're going to lose. They've signed some good players in the last couple of years, some very good players, and they've done some good deals. But this is another one that is not great, and is probably going to cost them financially at some point. Whether it's the best case scenario is they stay in the division, they keep him for a season, he plays, he does well, and his value goes up. But at the minute, I don't see how they sell him and they don't lose out financially on that deal.
It's just mental, isn't it, the transfer situation? Because if they stay up, normally you would want in this situation maybe a bit of a shake-up and maybe want some more players to come and improve on what they've got. But I'm going into this summer thinking, please, just keep the team together, almost, which is a really strict... Because for me, on the outside, I can't go through another summer window like we had 12 months ago. The amount of churn, both in and out. And I just can't see how going through another situation like that again benefits the football club, to be brutally honest. They need a bit of consistency and just a bit of continuity. And if they have to sit on what they've got and take another season of, marginal progression, then that's what they've got to do. Okay, next season could be completely different because we've seen from the away form of Ruben Sayers' side that they're very competitive away from home. The thing they need to do is actually stamp down what is their identity. Because for me, because I know we've seen patches of it, but I don't think we've seen the full Ruben. I still don't think we've seen the full Ruben Sayers style of football, to be honest. And it might become more visible if you get a couple of players in who can play to that style. But financially, behind the scenes, things could be very, very interesting in the summer, couldn't they?
Absolutely. We'll hold that thought. I know people keep asking about Oscar Zambrano. We won't see him again this season. That isn't to say that that's bad news. His ban hasn't been reduced to enable him to be playing before the end of the season. We're still waiting on full confirmation from CAS on what the outcome is. But he's not played since November. Even if his ban was lifted today, you're not going to see him. You wouldn't see him anyway. But he's not going to be back before the end of the season. That's obviously a decision that needs to be looked at in the summer once they know where they're at. They have got the obligation to buy Zambrano if they want to, but we'll park that for the time being. Doken Sinek, forgotten man, played 45 minutes against Colchester in the week on Tuesday night. I think it was a 4-0 win, which kept City second in the under-21s table behind Sheffield United, just ahead of Burnley, who have got a couple of games in hand on City, I think. But good to see Doken. Whatever happens to him, could he feature before the end of the season? The manager is kind of open to it if he keeps producing in training as he has been. But obviously he's playing for a contract, so he's out of contract. City do have the option, but he's playing for his very existence in football. So that's one to watch. We've got to go because I've got a press conference to get to, and I'm sure Kathryn and Fletch have got other things to do as well. Before we do head off, Kathryn, any other business?
I don't think I'm at the game on Monday, so if they play badly, you can blame me, or everyone can blame Prutz because it's on Sky.
Blame Prutz. Always blame Prutz for whatever. World hunger, wars, whatever it is. Blame Prutz.
How did his cycling go, by the way, Baz?
Well, he got there. What I don't know is, and nobody's been able to verify this because they won't let me see the CCTV cameras, but he definitely cycled in. Into the Stadium Bowl where they bring the tractors through. He cycled in there and down pitch side and then through. There was somebody from Sky and there was younger Bartholomew Brown from the club, and they stood there holding the tape they do at the end of marathons, and he cycled through that with a smile on his face. But I heard they stopped at South Cave for a pub lunch.
Very good.
But yeah, he may well have walked. He may well have walked like a part of it and then cycled into the stadium for the cameras. But no, he was happy. And look, it's for a great cause, isn't it? And I know it's still going on. So all in the name of British Heart Foundation and about CPR, learning how to CPR or to do CPR.
I heard from his other podcasts, by the way, that he might have nicked a motorised cycle for the off-camera moments. Just get him up to speed.
God, him. He's a scoundrel. A scoundrel. That
we all aspire to be him, don't we?
No, I don't. No, I'm not sure we do. Anyway, on that Prutton bombshell. Hopefully, he'll be back next week. That's it from the 1904 Club for this extra episode. Looking back on Watford. Let's try and be positive. It's still in their own hands, and this is a team we know can get results. Let's hope they pull one out the bag against the Sky Blues on Monday night in front of the cameras. If you are going to the MKM Stadium, enjoy it. Let's hope you enjoy it, and let's hope we're reflecting next week on a positive result. Fletch, as always, thank you.
Merci muchly. Go well over the weekend. What are you doing with your Saturday, by the way?
Working, probably.
Working. What, are you not going to... Don't get any downtime because playing on a Monday? Shocking.
Working, and maybe if I can eke out a ticket to the Everton game, I might see what I can do. But yeah, I'm definitely working half of Saturday anyway. Kathryn, thank you.
Retro shirts on Monday, isn't it? That's going to make all the difference to change the home form around. Everyone's got to wear a retro shirt. So,
Oh, on that, just quickly on that, how great was it to see Keane Lewis Potter wearing his retro City shirt at Brentford? I know
yeah.
they did something, didn't they? He turned up in his retro kit. So yeah, maybe City should play in a retro shirt, and that might fox Coventry a bit.
I didn't see Keane's picture of it. I saw the other players coming in. I'm going to have to go back and find that now.
Yeah, it's great. Oh, it's good to see Keno doing well. Anyway, that's it, everybody. Thank you so much for watching, for listening. Keep your thoughts, comments. As always, after the game, send us your thoughts and comments anyway. And we, even if we don't read them out on there, we certainly do read them. And we'll catch up with you next week. Thanks very much for watching. Up the Tigers.